Jimmy Butler does not want to be a Memphis Grizzly, despite the fact that he would be a perfect fit there. He would fit the grit and grind mentality of the city, and I think he could make them a legit championship contender. So why does he not want to go to Memphis? We've got the real reason finally revealed. I'm Trevor Lane. This is the Basketball Bulletin. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications as we head into the trade deadline. Joined by Donnie Freeman. Donnie, Jimmy hates Memphis. What does he have against Memphis? It's ridiculous.
I don't know, man. I wonder if he doesn't like the city or if he's had a bad experience there before. It's unfortunate, but like you were saying, he would fit perfectly there. So I kind of just want to see what it looks like. But hey, if he doesn't like the city then, or the team, I guess, and all this stuff related to that, then maybe you don't pull the trigger. But it's pretty interesting what's going on kind of behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. If you put them, John Morant, Desmond Bain, Jared Jackson Jr., they've got all the pieces that Jimmy would fit in very, very nicely with. They've got contracts they can trade for him. It makes sense. But here's what's going on. According to Brian Windhorst, the Grizzlies are indeed lurking in Butler trade talks, which is fantastic. And have been in contact with the Heat during the process. Rival league executives believe Memphis is trying to combine a talent influx with offloading some future salary so it can facilitate a contract extension for, not Jimmy Butler, Jared Jackson Jr. as early as this summer. Butler, meanwhile, has made it known he could opt out of his contract this summer and seek free agency. Sources have theorized that if the Grizzlies can acquire him for the playoff run and also free cap space this summer, that's where their interest might lie. It's all about the money. That's what this whole thing is about with Jimmy Butler. It's why he wants to leave Miami. They didn't want to give him his next contract. According to Windhorst here, it's not so much a fit issue because he fits great with Memphis. Memphis would be right there, I think, with OKC if they were to get Jimmy Butler. But the problem is Memphis wants to use him as an expiring contract, which means they won't give him a contract extension, and that's what Jimmy wants. That's why he wants to go to Phoenix. Phoenix has said, we'll pay you if you can get to our team. The Grizzlies are saying, well, we'll use you for a playoff run, but then you're going to be a free agent. And there's only two teams out there with money in free agency. It's the Nets. It's the Wizards. Neither team wants Jimmy Butler. That's what this is all about. Jimmy Butler hates Memphis because they don't want to pay him.
Yeah, I really love the suspense you put on there because you're like, I love it because because it's true. It's kind of shocking that Jimmy could go there but doesn't want to because of the money. But it's interesting how this all circles back to money, and I think that's a good way for us to circle into our Prize Picks ad.
Let's do it. Yeah. So Prize Picks, great sponsor for this show. We'll talk more about the Jimmy Butler situation in just a moment here, but use our promo code Bulletin with Prize Picks. You get a guaranteed $50 on your first $5 that you play. Super easy to do so. You can use the link in the description down below. Let's make some selections here. Des Bain for the Memphis Grizzlies. We've got Yves Missi for the Pels playing against Memphis. You've got some interesting options here. Another rookie and Zach Edey playing against the Pels and Yves Missi. Let's focus on this matchup. Des Bain, 20.5 points against the Pels. The Pelicans have now won 4 in a row. I don't know. I kind of feel like that line's high. What do you think about that?
I think he could do it, but I'm a hater right now because I'm on Jimmy's side. So we're going down. We're going down.
You're on Team Jimmy. And then we've got... Let's go. CJ McCollum, 3.5 rebounds against Memphis. I don't like rebound numbers like that. But I'll say that Zach Edey going up against a fellow rookie and Yves Missi, I'm going to say he gets that done. 15.5 points, rebounds, and assists combined. Less. And then I'll go here. McCollum, 7.5 points, rebounds, and assists. I think that'll give us enough coverage there to clear it. All right, everybody. Use the link in the description down below. If you guys want to play along, you can. Use our code Bulletin. That way they know that you came from us. We certainly do appreciate it when you guys help support the companies that support us. All right, back to Jimmy and not wanting to be a Memphis Grizzly. So it's funny because Mark Spears put out there, I believe it was yesterday, the time has lost all meaning as we're heading towards the NBA trade deadline. But I believe it was yesterday that he said that Jimmy Butler wants to go anywhere. We will play for any team except for Miami and except for Memphis. So to me, this tells you that Jimmy's threat of leaving in free agency really is a pretty hollow one. And Miami knows this, and they're playing that up. And that's why Miami is telling Jimmy, look, we're not worried about losing you for nothing, because even if you don't pick up the $52 million player option, which, oh, the humanity, how terrible life must be for Jimmy Butler to have to play next year for $52 million. But if he doesn't pick that up, he's not leaving the Miami Heat high and dry. Normally in this situation, what happens is the star player would be telling their incumbent team, hey, if you guys don't trade me, I'm going to go sign with team X, Y, or Z in free agency. There's nowhere for him to go. So Miami says, look, even if you won't come back and play for us next season and you're a free agent, you still have to go through us because you need to get signed and traded somewhere. That's why we're not worried about you just walking away and leaving us for nothing. So we're going to make sure we get back the stuff that we need in a trade for you. And that's why right now the reporting is that Miami isn't getting the offers they want to move him just yet. And so they're still hanging on to him right now. They're not worried about losing Jimmy Butler for nothing. If they were, they'd probably have already moved on from him.
Yeah, that's probably the case. Like you said, it's unfortunate because I think there's been wrongdoings on both sides. We mainly talk about how Jimmy's mailed it in. I don't really like some of Pat's comments that he made, sure, but they hold all the cards in terms of Jimmy getting to whatever destination he wants right now or later, facilitating a big contract through sign and trade for him in the offseason, which is why they feel like they can maybe try to ask teams. There was a report earlier about, getting specific lengths on contracts. They're willing to take back a deal, but it has to expire next offseason. They're ideally looking for draft capital or young players. And, they're trying to trade for or execute a trade for Jimmy like he isn't a depreciating asset that they can maybe get something else for. That's not really the case here, but regardless, he's just in a weird spot. And I do think it's unfortunate, like we said a couple times, that he is kind of singling out Memphis for the most part. The report that he's willing to go anywhere but Memphis and Miami is within reason, of course, because he's not going to the Washington Wizards willingly anyway, within reason, of course. But I just don't know that this could be the thing where a team comes out of nowhere that we weren't talking about, weren't expecting, and he winds up going there. But you always have that concern. And I think he'd do the right thing, given that he would be potentially in a contract year, or excuse me, he currently is in a contract year, but you have the situation where he could potentially go somewhere else that he wasn't expecting or wasn't looking towards going to. And you have the fear of him potentially mailing it in, but I think he'd do the right thing. And ultimately, I know that the Memphis thing is tricky because they're trying to use him for something else. They're trying to get a run out of him, which, I mean, would it be the worst thing if you get a run that you guys actually, push pretty deep? Would that be the worst thing?
Okay, so that's the question, right? That's really the question now. So, and by the way, you could see based on Miami's cap sheet why they want contracts that expire by 2026, because they're set to be big players in free agency in that summer of 2026. But when we talk about the Memphis Grizzlies, could they Kawhi Leonard Jimmy Butler, right? And trade for him, knowing that he might not stay with what the Raptors did with Kawhi Leonard, and just say, you know what, we're going to go for it. This is where Jimmy being on his worst behavior will work in his favor, because he wants to convince Memphis, oh, no, you don't want to do this, because he doesn't want to be put in a situation for next year for this coming summer, where he's a free agent and there's nobody with cap space. And then what does he do, right? He doesn't want to be put in that situation. So he needs to try to convince the Grizzlies that, look, you guys don't want to trade for me. I will tank. I will sandbag it. I will not give you my best effort. I'm going to be annoying. I'm going to be unhappy. And you don't want an unhappy Jimmy Butler. That's what the message that he's trying to convey. The question is, would the Grizzlies call his bluff and just say, you know what? We're going to trust that if we put you on the floor, you're going to get out there, you're going to play hard, and we could potentially win the whole damn thing. And that will be enough for you to say, hey, I'm going to do everything I can to win a championship right now, and then we'll see where the chips all fall. But if I win a championship this year, I think I'm going to get taken care of somehow, some way. That's the question. Would Jimmy really show up in Memphis if the Grizzlies say, we're going to roll the dice, we're going to trade for Jimmy, we know we're probably not going to keep him long term, but we're going to trade for him, and we're going to trust that he'll be professional? How much are you willing to gamble if you're Memphis? Do you think, Donnie, that Jimmy would show up in Memphis and just be a malcontent if they trade for him?
No, that's what I was saying. I think he may try that up in the beginning, there would
Yeah,
be reports about how, he's not happy about it. But I think ultimately he would go and he would participate and play well, because what are his options otherwise? I mean, he would have to, if he opts in and then tries to run it back and ask for a trade next offseason or next season, excuse me, that's an option that he would potentially have. But
sure.
they probably aren't willing to really so much do that, because they're trying to do this whole other thing with Jaren Jackson anyway. I don't really know what their plan is in terms of how that would line up. But Jimmy doesn't have a lot of options here. I think he has to go wherever he's traded to, again, within reason. And well, to be honest, if he's traded to the Wizards, he has to go out there and put his best foot forward. But I
Sure.
think he has to go wherever he goes and show what he can do and earn that next contract, because that's the thing about it. I mean, he wants to go to Phoenix because he knows guaranteed they will give him the money. And that's fair. That's all well and dandy. But what if that's not possible? What if you can't get there?
Yeah, that's going to be the challenge for him. And I think the danger for Memphis is actually you trade for Jimmy and then he goes, guess what? I'm going to really F up your cap situation. I'm going to pick up my option for $52 million. And now you've got to sign an extension for Jaren Jackson.
He would do that, because would they be able to sign and trade him elsewhere? Because he'd have to do that, because I don't.
They could sign and trade him, but otherwise, yeah, he would just pick up that money. And then that could, mess some things up for them. Now he would still be expiring that next year. And so Memphis would probably be okay in the long run, but that would be an interesting wrinkle in all of this. But man, I come back to, I do think Jimmy Butler's going to get moved. I think he's going to get traded. I think he wants to go to Phoenix. Phoenix has said they'll pay him. He'll get to Phoenix. I still think the Grizzlies are probably the best fit. The Grizzlies or the Warriors are the best fits for him. Phoenix is not bad, but the Grizzlies would be a great fit. The only problem is clearly the priority for Jimmy is to get paid. That's the priority here. And that's okay. I don't fault him for that, but he wants to get paid. And if Memphis is not going to do that, they're going to see him as more of an expiring contract. That puts him in a tough situation for next year. But I do think if there's some way they can figure it out, there's pieces on this Grizzlies roster that would make sense for the Miami Heat to go after. They have contracts that expire in 2026. And Jimmy would be a great fit on a team that could win a championship. I think they would be that good. They would be a championship contender with Jimmy Butler. So I'm disappointed that this is where things are at, that Jimmy just does not want to go to the Memphis Grizzlies. And as a non-Grizzlies fan, because I would be very nervous if I was a Grizzlies fan, but as a non-Grizzlies fan, I kind of just want to see Memphis roll the dice and say, screw it. We don't care. We're trading for him anyway.
That would just be so it's got so much potential to be such a good move or such a terrible move in hindsight.
It's peak drama, right? This is it's a high risk maneuver. It's either you're great or it all blows up and there's no in between.
The good news is that if you're Memphis, it's not a long-term issue if it is an issue in the first place. Like, say he just refuses to play or whatever and is willing to just, the Ben Simmons thing forever ago where he sat out, got fined repeatedly, and say Jimmy does something drastic like that. Well, okay, you still got what you ultimately wanted. So it still kind of works out for you after this season, though, doesn't it? I mean, aside from whatever assets you potentially have to give up right here and now, it's just, I don't really, in terms of Jimmy, I think that's where it's more like problematic, because I don't really know what options he has. You mentioned the Warriors. To be honest, I had forgotten all about the Jimmy Butler Warriors saga. What do you think is happening there? Do you think that's still a possibility?
I mean, the latest reporting is that the Warriors are out. They've decided that, and this is from Brett Siegel of Clutch Points. They've decided that Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga giving up both wings is just not worth it to get Jimmy Butler, especially given that they would have to pay Jimmy on his next. I mean, that's got to be a big part of it. It's the reason why Brandon Ingram is still a Pelican, right? Jimmy's a good player, but teams don't want to give up stuff for him, plus have to give him his next contract. It's the same thing with Brandon Ingram. Teams say, hey, he's a good player, we want him, but we don't want to give up stuff for him, plus have to give him a $50 million contract after this. And I think that's ultimately the math here for the Warriors. They don't want to be in on Jimmy Butler if they have to give up Wiggins, plus Kuminga, young talent, plus other contracts in order to make the math work, and then pay Jimmy. I think that's the wrinkle. If Jimmy was under contract for, let's call it 3 more seasons at $35 million a season, I think the Warriors would be very interested. I think a number of teams would be very interested. Sure. But the problem is teams don't want to give him $50 million plus, except for the Suns, and that's why Jimmy wants to go to the Suns.
It's funny how it all just goes full circle. I don't
It really
fault him
does.
for wanting to try to get the money though, but
No,
I wish he would be okay with going to Memphis because I think they could potentially do something really special if they got him.
absolutely. But I think Memphis would have to tell him we're willing to pay you. If Memphis told him they're willing to pay him, I think that would probably change all of this.
Hmm.
But if they're not willing to do that, then Jimmy would really be in a tough spot this summer if Memphis were to trade for him, because he would
Yeah.
either have to. And I know I make light of it, but he would have to either pick up the 52 million and then hope to get traded by Memphis, or hope they change their mind and want to keep him long term or something, or that somebody the following summer has cap space to pay him when he's 36 years old. Or he'd have to hope that Memphis can work with him on a sign and trade, and that might limit his destinations as well.
And that's
So,
been my whole point is he doesn't have a lot of options. Like there's things obviously, but there's not a lot of outcomes here where he's able to get not only everything he wants, destination, all that, but just money. Like the money itself is just hard to do.
and that's why he wants Phoenix so bad, because Phoenix is everything, right? They'll pay him. He can play with Durant. He could play with Booker, and there you go. It's not easy to get there, but I still think it probably happens, but this is why this is why he is so hyper focused on Phoenix as being the destination, or why it appears that he's so hyper focused on Phoenix. It's because it gets you everything that you're wanting here. So that's we'll see if it happens. The best case scenario for Jimmy is to go to Phoenix, but for him to win a championship, it would probably be to go to Memphis this year and play it out and then see what happens. But again, I don't fault Jimmy for wanting to get paid.
No, you're right. I absolutely don't either. I also kind of feel like he's in a weird spot because he's in his late 30s now. A lot of times guys kind of start skewing more towards long-term stability at that point, but he hasn't won one and he's hyper competitive. And I feel like, maybe he feels like if he goes to Phoenix, then they'd have a great shot too. So maybe that's another layer of it too, because he just hasn't won one yet. And I think he wants one, of course. And I think maybe he'd have a better shot elsewhere, but maybe he feels like he'd have a really good shot in Phoenix, which I think they would have a good shot too. You get them in a series, that's going to be a tough out. Especially with Nick Richards now and the changes they've been making. I like Ryan Dunn. I've always said all along, I like their roster. They've just underperformed.
Yeah. So. And they're sitting in the 10th seed in the NBA's Western Conference right now. So we'll see though. The West is wide open. Anybody can make a run right now. OKC sits alone at the top, and then everybody else is kind of, jumbled in a mess there. So we'll see where that ultimately lands. But Jimmy Butler doesn't want to be a Memphis Grizzly. It appears that's for financial reasons. So we'll see what ultimately happens here. To the Grizzlies just say, you know what? We're going to roll the dice and trade for him anyway. Does Jimmy convince the Grizzlies that it's not worth it to trade for him and have a disgruntled Jimmy Butler in your roster? And does he ultimately wind up with the Phoenix Suns in a Bradley Beal trade? A lot going on around the NBA trade market, so make sure you do subscribe right here. We talked a little bit earlier today about Zach LaVine suddenly popping up on the radar of the Phoenix Suns. It's a crazy time. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. Till next time. See ya. And stay safe.